all meeting because I know, Martha, you've done this a lot, unless you feel like you want me on all meeting, Robin.
Well, if you want to be, but I think once we get rolling, we should be okay. I mean, you've got the full presentation that goes from beginning to end, correct?
I do.
I'm going to hit record. So I want to welcome you to the Farm to Table Best Practices during this COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Robin Young, and I am the Archuleta County CSU Extension Director. And I wanted to hold this webinar so that people could understand what the best practices are during this time. We've been getting a lot of questions on how to handle produce, and I want to preface this whole meeting with saying that I was on a call Tuesday with the Center for Disease Control, and they were saying that there's no evidence that this virus will transmit from a produce or any other type of food by ingesting it, and that there's no evidence that it lives on the surface of produce. And so you won't get sick by ingesting food with COVID-19. So I want to welcome our speakers today. We have Mary Snow, who is a family and consumer science agent in Jefferson County. We have Martha Sullins, who is a specialist for produce safety. And we also have Christy Dice, who is a specialist for produce safety. So I want to welcome everybody and thank our presenters today. And with that, I'm going ahead to turn it over to Martha, and she'll get us started.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Robin. And so, yes, we're really happy to be with you here today and hopefully to provide some information as we get started into the production and marketing season, as well as consumption. Just provide you with some information that'll help you fine-tune your practices and make you feel more confident no matter where you are along the supply chain. And I'd really like to thank everybody for joining us this Friday afternoon. It's been a really long week, another long week. And I just would like to thank, all of our food producers, our health providers, and all the other community members who are working so hard to keep us safe and well nourished during this time and beyond. So today's webinar, we're going to talk about, provide you with some strategies for bringing food safely from the farm to the table in this time of COVID-19. This is going to be based on our current knowledge about the virus and its transmission, as well as good agricultural practices and proper food handling techniques. So some of what we discussed today will seem like repetition to some of you. If it does, it's because maybe you sat through a produce safety training class with me or Christy, or you attended a food safety class with Mary. If that's the case, we're really glad you get to hear it again. Repetition's important. If we haven't worked with you yet, we are really glad to connect with you, have you online today, and we certainly hope that we'll be able to keep working with you. So the first thing we want to go over is just briefly some overview information about coronavirus and COVID-19 in particular, because that really helps us understand what our practices need to be as we look at this whole supply chain management. So coronavirus and in particular COVID-19 is a respiratory illness that can be spread from person to person. So it's human transmission. The virus that causes COVID-19 is a novel or a new coronavirus. It was first identified in Wuhan, China in December 2019. And it's really similar to the severe acute respiratory syndrome or SARS outbreak that occurred in 2003, also in China. And that ended in 2004. So they are similar in that they're both coronaviruses. However, what's different about COVID-19, this newly identified coronavirus, is it seems to spread faster than that 2003 SARS virus. And it also seems like it has a different level of impact. So we'll talk about that a little bit. One of the things that we'll circle back to several times is it is a respiratory illness, and it means you're going to contract it if you do, which we hope you do not, through your respiratory tract, through your respiratory system, but not through your digestive system. So while you may ingest it, all evidence points to the fact that that is not the method of infection. So from what we know today, it is a respiratory illness. And so how is it transmitted? Again, you'll start to see some themes here. One of the ways is through close contact with someone who is infected. And so that's why we talk about social distancing. And so having that about 6 foot seems to be a good guideline for the length that respiratory droplets might travel when an infected person coughs, sneezes, or even talks. And so, those droplets can land either, in the mouth or nose of someone who's within 6 feet or closer, could be inhaled by that person, could land on a surface, and then someone touches that surface and touches their mouth, nose, eyes. So it's that method of transmission. And also what's different about COVID-19 is it seems like there are asymptomatic carriers. So again, this really ties back to us having very good health and hygiene practices, very good cleaning and sanitation programs, because it seems like there are people who can carry high viral loads of the COVID-19 virus in their upper respiratory tract, so which means they're transmitting it, but we don't see any symptoms of it. So again, social distancing, surface sanitation are going to be really important for us to work on. Surfaces. And so Robin started us out talking about this, and this has been one area where there's been a lot of discussion. There was a study that was published recently in the New England Journal of Medicine showing that COVID-19 can live both in the air, so aerosolized, as well as on surfaces between several hours and several days. And so that study in laboratory conditions found that the virus is viable for up to 72 hours on plastics, 48 hours on stainless steel, 24 hours on cardboard, and then 4 hours on copper, detectable in the air for 3 hours. Well, these were laboratory conditions. Other researchers have looked at this, and while they are laboratory results, there's just been no clinical evidence that the virus in a sufficient viral load would persist on a surface, and that would be the way that someone would contract COVID-19. So again, not enough viral material, not going to remain airborne, probably not viable on these surfaces in enough of a viral load to be able to infect someone. So again, we have no clinical or, field-based evidence showing that there's any connection between food or food packaging and the transmission of COVID-19. Another thing that is really important to recognize as we think about our practices that are going to help us keep our workforce safe and healthy and keep our food safe and healthy is the fact that it's relatively easy to deactivate COVID-19. And so that particular coronavirus has a really interesting structure that it's enveloped in this lipid envelope. And so it's really easily infiltrated or compromised by disinfectants, even by soap and scrubbing. And so you'll see why we'll talk a lot about sanitation. That's why it's so easy or relatively easy once that envelope surrounding the virus is damaged. And it compromises the integrity of that virus and then neutralizes its ability to infect anyone. And so that's why we're going to talk about regular cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. So we'll go back to that quite a few times. We did put a link here that is from, it's a public service announcement from Frank Yanis, who is with the FDA, and just talking again about the safety of our food supply chain, as well as the fact that we just don't have any evidence showing that we need to be concerned about COVID-19 being transmitted on food or any kind of food packaging. And we'll talk about that at the farm level, as well as at the household level. So some of the things that we want to focus on today really start with the health of you as a farm manager, as someone in your household. If you're a farmer, your crew, and that can be, your crew might be paid employees, volunteers, interns, your family members. Everybody's really worried about their health and welfare. And so what we really want to emphasize is how important it is to protect our collective health, and we want to empower people to protect their personal health. And so things that we want to think about, and there are three things that we want to look at here, and then we'll talk about the details. One is monitoring yourself, your crew, whoever that might be, for symptoms, so you need to know what you're looking for. Creating an environment where employees and others have that knowledge and tools to keep themselves safe and healthy. So we want people to be able to look out for each other, look out for themselves, and help to keep our community as healthy as possible. Our food supply, production, distribution, retail has been deemed critical infrastructure. And so knowing that we all have to work really hard to remain healthy and producing the food that's really needed now and always, certainly. And then the last point is following best practices at all times. Thinking the incubation period for COVID-19 is 2 to 14 days. You just can never relax on any of your worker health and hygiene, your surface sanitation programming at all. You really need to be diligent because this is always a best practice, but B, we're dealing with something that is, we're still learning about it. And so what we're going to talk about now are some of those worker health and hygiene best practices. Now, these are not in alignment, for example, or do not explain the new federal relief packages at all, but what it is it's really understanding your employee needs, and particularly making sure that employees or your work crew, if they're ill, they know they need to get off the job. They know that they cannot work with food, work with produce until they are until they're well. And there are varying a lot of times it's like 3 days after quarantine's 14 days. But just recognizing that employees may have to leave because they have to quarantine themselves, they may have to take care of a sick family member. And so making sure that you plan for potential absences. And I know this is a really difficult thing to think about, but just making sure that you have the potential to staff up when you have these absences. And we're seeing absences across the food supply chain at this time as people become sick, they recover. So another thing is about, going back to knowledge, making sure that employees know what the symptoms of COVID-19 are and, what your policies are, that they cannot come to work if they are ill. And of course, if they're ill with anything, they shouldn't come to work, but particularly if they suspect they've been exposed to or they think they have COVID-19, they need to quarantine. If you house interns, if you have lodging for employees, you really need to make sure at all times, especially now, that you do have those adequate hygiene facilities. So those are restrooms, running water, soap, paper towels. We'll talk about all of that in a minute when we talk about hand washing. But, as well as facilities for workers to keep their clothes clean, to keep themselves clean, so they don't become a source of infecting others in your workforce. They also have the supply of products that they need, and so that's going to be, cleaning materials, sanitizing, disinfecting products, and make sure they have protective equipment, because we're talking about pesticides. In a lot of cases, we're talking about detergents or agricultural chemicals that can be harsh, and especially when we're looking at sanitizing and disinfecting levels, we want to make sure that anybody who's handling those materials is well protected with hand protection, eye protection, whatever's necessary according to that label. And then really making sure that all those common spaces where workers might end up crossing paths, where they would typically congregate, those are considered, they're going to be more high touch areas. They're going to pose additional risk. And so 2 strategies there. One is making sure that you clean and sanitize those areas more frequently than you would have previously, as much as 2 times a day. That's the food industry standard at this time. And then also minimizing that congregating. And so if you're having a meeting, if you're transporting people, keeping people into smaller groups so that you reduce that potential source of cross-contamination between workers. So here are some materials. The CDC has a lot of materials that you can use in English, Spanish. I think there are other languages too, so that you can really make sure at that educational level of the folks you are working with that you can explain to them about the symptoms of COVID-19 and what they need to do to be safe in the workplace and in their homes. And the second poster is Stop the Spread of Germs. Well, this includes other foodborne illnesses too. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today really does apply not just to COVID-19 as a respiratory illness, but you'll see we're going to be talking about practices that apply across your farm, across your production site, and are going to be really important to make a part of your regular practices. So, of course, everybody has heard about hand washing. This is the most important surface as a grower, as someone who handles food. Hand washing is your primary food contact surface. So you'll hear us talk about food contact. A food contact surface is one that food either directly touches or may touch. And of course, as growers, as people who handle food, that's what your hands are. So really important to have, the how, when, what, and why, and where of hand washing explained to your coworkers, your crew, your employees. And so a graphic there on the side of your screen shows you proper hand washing and gives you, the process for wetting your hands with running water, applying soap, and lathering your hands, scrubbing between the fingers. You can see the steps there, reminder that all of that of the rubbing your hands and everything, and trying to abrade and remove any particulate matter. That lasts for 20 seconds at a minimum. And then making sure that your hands are rinsed well. That removes all the soap, because you certainly don't want to get that on food. And then drying your hands on either a disposable paper towel or another single-use towel. That's really important. So we will show you the website where we have some educational materials like this that are both in English and in Spanish. They're now, developing hand washing materials, videos, and everything is a whole industry in and of itself, because it's just important to find a lot of ways to emphasize how important having clean hands is. The times when you need to make sure the hands are washed, of course, after using the restroom, before and after eating, because remember, we don't want to ingest anything and make ourselves sick. We certainly don't want to take anything from a break room back out to the field. So we're going to be washing our hands before and after eating, after taking a break. And then, of course, after blowing your nose, coughing, sneezing, touching your face, you've definitely heard about this. In addition, for preventing cross-contamination and other foodborne illnesses like salmonella or E. coli, after touching an animal feed or animal waste, it's really important to wash hands. We'll talk about gloves a little bit more, but definitely before putting on gloves, you certainly don't want to contaminate the outside of the glove by putting your gloves on with dirty hands. And then the last part of this is making sure that you have the materials available for whoever's going to be who's going to need to wash their hands. You have those fully stocked hand washing stations. And so that involves, again, having that running water, temperature doesn't matter, soap, Making sure that the quality of that water is of no detectable generic E. coli in a 100 milliliter sample. A lot of times you'll see this referred to as potable water. We're really moving now towards having more measurable standards of water quality, but also then having that water that's of appropriate quality paper towels, and as we said, single-use towels, and then a trash can to put that waste in. We're really trying to make sure that we have no ways for that contamination to spread, or potential contamination to spread anywhere else. So another thing to think about, masks and gloves when handling food. So when is this a good idea? What kind of things should you be thinking about? And I've heard growers say it might make people feel better if I had a mask on, and it may, but there may be a lot more risks involved in using masks than it would provide a real well-founded assurance. And of course, some of the risks are handling those masks and, you know, kind of spreading contamination all around your face. People tend to touch their face more when they have a mask on. It tends to provide a false sense of security that you've got this mask on. You can get closer to people, nothing, you know, there's not going to be any kind of transmission. There are a lot of issues around wearing masks. I would say one of the most important ones is that, you know, our healthcare workers really need, particularly those N95 masks right now. And so using social distancing, clean and sanitized surfaces is a good strategy. And until the point where we are, it's recommended that we all wear masks. That, you know, that's our recommendation at this time, is to use these other strategies instead of using masks.
Hey, Martha.
It does be, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make
Sure.
a few comments. I
Sure.
did get a text today from the San Juan Basin Public Health.
Okay.
They are now recommending in Archuleta and La Plata County that people do wear masks.
Okay.
On the other side of that, on this call that I was on Tuesday with the CDC, their report is that these masks are to help others prevent from you. So it's just a prevention. If you have it, then you're not spreading the disease to another person. And I think that's why our Basin Health wanted us to know that. But I just wanted to interject that. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, that's really good, especially for folks in your region to know that that's a recommendation. So it may be difficult, like other types of supplies, it may be difficult to find the masks that would really provide that level of protection that you need, those N95 masks. So there is a lot of information about how to make masks. We're going to send this presentation out afterward, and there's a link to how you can make your own mask. So should it become necessary, you've got some information on how to do that. You know, considerations with gloves, they certainly are not required. They can be really important for food handlers. There are, you know, lots of different types of gloves. So typically we're seeing the nitrile disposable gloves. They're certainly in high demand, but they do provide, when they're used appropriately, when they're put on and then disposed of at the right time, they can provide a really good element of protection, particularly at food handling point of sale. You know, they are single use, and so whenever you change activities, like you go to handle money or do something else that's not related to food, you need to dispose of those gloves, wash your hands, put on new gloves when you come back to food handling. And of course, if they're torn or compromised in any way, they need to go out. Reusable gloves can offer, you know, some level of protection, but again, you know, it's really difficult to keep them clean and sanitized, and they just have a lot more surfaces that might be subject to, you know, providing a source of cross-contamination, and you really need to keep an eye on the condition of gloves. So what that means is, you know, really having a policy around gloves and making sure that your workers know how to identify when they need to use gloves, when they need to change gloves, that they can't throw them in the trunks of their car and take them home, throw them around on the floor, that there are very, very specific policies around using gloves. This, kind of all leads us into thinking about how we're going to improve and really enhance our farm hygiene and sanitation program. So, one thing to think about is you're definitely going to continue all that routine cleaning and sanitizing, but you're going to evaluate it too and see where you need to upgrade to a new version, which is really going to be that enhanced level. So let's start talking about, non-food contact surfaces. So those are going to be all those surfaces where, you are not going to, food is not going to directly touch it. And so, that could be things like, your, well, we've got a list of them there, but certainly like, keyboards and, other areas like the floor is not a food contact surface. Parts of processing equipment are not a food contact surface, but may contribute to potential contamination. Other non-food contact surfaces are going to be ones that people tend to interact with a lot. And so you're going to want to regularly clean and disinfect those areas, particularly looking at those, evaluating where people are moving, and how they might be, how often they're using those, and then make sure that, particularly for those high touch areas, that you're going to clean them a lot more frequently. Again, that's probably going to be at least 2 times a day using some kind of a disinfecting solution or wipes to make sure that that you really keep those surfaces clean. Then identifying those food contact surfaces. And so again, we're going to think bins, tables, sinks, any containers that or surfaces that might come into contact with food. And that, of course, we're going to want to make sure that those surfaces we're going to increase the frequency of cleaning and sanitizing. So again, looking at least daily as a schedule. You may have a system that's a little more intermittent right now. You're going to really want to ramp that up more. And when we're talking about food, we mean, let's talk fruits and vegetables. And of course, we've got some products that are, much more susceptible to potential contamination than other products. And so we really want to be careful there. And then making sure that you and your employees or workers really understand the difference between cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting, because you see these terms a lot, and you really need to understand what step is appropriate, both as a sequence and if you're looking at a non-food contact surface versus a food contact surface, and making sure that you have training set up that's going to support that. So let's just take a quick look at some definitions, because this is really important. So the first step before doing either cleaning or before doing sanitizing or disinfecting, of course, is to clean that, germs, dirt, other impurities from surfaces. And so, this is important for removing the barriers that are going to keep your sanitizer or keep your disinfectant from actually working on that surface and removing the viral load, for example. So this is the first step before you do any sanitizing or disinfecting. For food contact surfaces and non-food contact surfaces, sanitizing provides a step on clean surfaces that lowers microorganisms of public health significant to what's considered a safe level. And so that means you're using a lower concentration of a product. It has the contact time on that surface is less, but it's also not entirely removing microorganisms from that surface to like 99.999%. You don't have quite that level. That's where disinfecting comes in. And that's where what you practice only on non-food contact surfaces, because you don't want to use a disinfectant on anything where food might become contaminated by that chemical. So that actually is going to destroy microorganisms on a clean surface. And what it will do is actually, deactivate those microorganisms to the point where they pose no basically no threat to human health. Disinfectants are used in a much higher concentration and for a longer contact time. But kind of keeping those definitions in mind can help you then understand how you're going to be using products and how they're going to fit into your sanitation program. So Christy, I'm going to pass it to you now, and I'll change the slide.
Thank you, Martha. And thanks to everybody who's joining us today. We really appreciate your time today. So we're going to talk a little bit about products used for sanitizing and disinfecting. So each sanitizing and disinfecting product is labeled for specific uses, and it needs to be used in a certain way to guarantee effectiveness. Every product has a label that includes information on how it should be used, and that is regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency. So as you're considering choosing a product or using a product you already have maybe, you should read the label and understand the following. Can it be used on a food contact surface, or is it only labeled for a non-food contact surface? What concentration is needed for it to have sanitizing effects, or which is needed for it to do a disinfecting step? Does it need to be air dried? Does it need to be rinsed off? How long is the contact time needed? So how much time does that product need to stay on the surface to be effective? So those are all things to think about as you're choosing a product or as you're using a product that you already have. So there are some agencies out there and some groups that have made some tools to help us identify these products and understand how to use the products. And so one of the agencies is the Produce Safety Alliance, and so they created an Excel tool that provides information to help you determine what sanitizer would work for you, or it can help you quickly identify information on a product you already are using. So it's a spreadsheet that you can download. If you go to that link that's provided there, you can download the spreadsheet, and when it opens up, you'll see it has a lot of columns and rows across it. And it provides information like the common name. So if you're using a specific product, you can scroll down the list and find the product that you're using. And then it also includes active ingredients. It includes the types of uses that the product is used for, or is approved for, sorry. So that would be food contact surfaces. Is it allowed on to be used in wash water? Is it allowed for irrigation water? So it provides all of that information for each of the products. And then it also provides a link to the EPA label. So the EPA is the Environmental Protection Agency, and so those labels that I mentioned earlier, they can be pretty lengthy. Some of them that I've looked at are up to 50 to 80 pages long, and so this Excel spreadsheet tool really helps you dial in on the page number where you need to find the information on how to use the product for the use you're looking for. And then there's also some information on there about whether or not the product can be used for organic operations. So that's important to a lot of our growers as well. And then EPA also has a list of products that are approved for viruses or other emerging pathogens. And so the EPA list N includes products that are labeled for human coronavirus. And that spreadsheet that is on the website that we have listed there can be sorted to find those particular products. You won't find any products that are listed for the SARS-CoV-2 on any labels because it's a new virus and companies haven't had the opportunity to do the testing to get approval to put that on their label. But EPA is recommending those products that are labeled for human coronavirus. So if you're looking for that specifically, you can go to that list. And a lot of the products that farmers or growers are currently using are on that list. So just check it out and see if there's anything, or if the product that you're using is already on that list, because it likely is. Next slide, Martha. So it's really important to be prepared for implementing your food safety practices. Having the correct supplies and processes in place will ensure you and anyone who works for you is able to perform those processes that you put in place. So some things to consider are make sure you have enough supplies on hand and the right supplies you need to complete your food safety practices. Products for hygiene like soap, paper towels, and hand sanitizer, like Martha mentioned earlier, are really vital for keeping you and your employees healthy. So having those things on hand is really important. keeping plenty of cleaning and sanitizing supplies available as well, things like detergents and sanitizers, as well as those tools and supplies you need to perform those activities like buckets, brushes, spray bottles, measuring tools, those type of things. And then also, if you're going the tools that you use to perform those cleaning tasks, make sure that you have them designated in some way to identify what practice they're supposed to be used for. So some of our farmers will color code their tools. So they'll say all of our red tools are only used for food contact surfaces, and all of our black tools are only used for non-food contact surfaces. And so by providing that visual representation, it can make it a lot easier for employees to understand what tools they're supposed to use for what activities. So we wanted to provide this link to make your own hand sanitizer. We've all heard that, you know, those hand sanitizers are in short supply. And so the World Health Organization put together instructions on how to safely make a homemade hand sanitizer. And so you want to be sure to follow their process so that way it's not only effective, but it's also safe to use. So go to that link if you wanted to try and make your own hand sanitizer. It's important to develop a schedule for your cleaning and sanitizing activities, and you should assign someone to oversee these processes and make sure that they're being completed properly and on that schedule that you've determined. It's also important to make sure your employees are cleaning and sanitizing correctly, so you should develop written processes called standard operating procedures. And different types of surfaces will need to be cleaned and sanitized in different ways, so it's important to have specific processes for each type of surface that will be cleaned and sanitized. So for example, your food contact surfaces may be cleaned and should be cleaned more frequently than your non-food contact surfaces, and so you want to create separate processes for when and how each of those surfaces will be cleaned and sanitized. So it's just really good to have all that stuff written down so that way your employees know exactly what's expected of them, and that you can have that to refer back to as you're training people as well. It's a good practice to remind employees frequently and in different ways what your food safety expectations are for them. And so reinforcing your food safety practices by posting signage in multiple areas around the farm is a really good way to do that. You want employees to understand that they can't come to work when they're sick and that they need to maintain personal hygiene and cleanliness. And this goes for all times. This isn't just during our COVID-19 outbreak. You know, it's a really important food safety consideration no matter what time of year it is or what is going on in our world at the time. Next slide, Martha. So there are a lot of resources available for you to communicate your expectations to employees or visitors or anyone else at the farm. So think about all the people who come to the farm and where they go when they're at the farm, and then you can put signage in those areas where people are visiting and where they're going to see them. We have a link here for fact sheets that are available at the Center for Disease Control, or CDC. They have a lot of fact sheets available for a lot of different things. We have the one here that's the symptoms of COVID-19, and so that's a good one, but they also have a lot of other fact sheets. So I just encourage you to go there and scroll down through that list and see if there's options that work for your farm. And then I also want to point out that they have them available. Many of those fact sheets are available in multiple languages, including Spanish, Simplified Chinese, and Ukrainian. We've had some farmers in Colorado request Ukrainian type of documents, and so I was happy to see that there on the CDC website. And then the document on the other side of the slide is from the Washington Department of Health, and they put together a document that you can have visitors complete. And so it's a checklist there, and as you have visitors come to the farm, you can have them check that off. You could also do some kind of online version of that, so that way you don't have paper going back and forth. But it just allows you to explain to visitors what your expectations are for them as they visit your farm. And if you already have a visitor policy, you could just add any additional expectations you may have to that document. You certainly don't need to create a whole new document just for COVID-19. You can just add things to it. But that's another good document. That's kind of like a template to help you get started for thinking about what you want to communicate to visitors as they come to your farm. Next slide. You should inform your customers of what you're doing at your farm to protect your employees as well as protecting your products and ultimately those customers. Communicate to your customers what practices you're doing to help ensure food safety. You can put this information on your website, you can post it in your farm stand or at your CSA pickup sites. You know, just having that information there and letting them know that you're taking food safety seriously, you're taking your health and their health seriously is always a good way to get customers to feel good about using your product or eating your product. You want to look for ways to reduce the amount of contact time customers have with your food products. You can have your employees use disposable gloves for all produce handling, like bagging and boxing. You could do some steps where you pre-package your produce for your customers and your CSA shares. As we've mentioned a few times, I think, during this presentation, that you should clean and sanitize your food contact surfaces frequently, you know, at least one time per day, if not more frequently. It's just a good practice to be in. And then due to what we know about this virus and the need for social distancing, you should put some processes in place to reduce congregating of customers. So you want to provide clear signage of where you want customers to go and where you don't want them to go, maybe. Designate where they can browse and where they would go to pay for their products. As much as possible, restrict visitor and customer access to any areas where you're growing, packing, storing, preparing foods. It's just good to keep people out of those areas as much as possible. And then, you know, another thing you can do is consider extending your sales hours to allow more time during the day for customers to visit your farm and to help prevent crowding. So if you can spread your customers over a longer period of time, then that's, you know, less people you have to manage while they're at your site. Next slide. So communicating with your employees is also very important. Martha mentioned this earlier. And so there's some resources out there that are available, and you know, more and more people are creating these resources as well. So I think we all know that communication is very important in all aspects of life, but particularly during this time, you want your employees to really have a clear understanding of what you expect of them. And so the Produce Marketing Association put together a checklist that you can use to provide your employees with your expectations of them to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. It discusses things like hand washing, social distancing, as well as basic hygiene practices. You can download that flyer from that link that's on the slide and add your logo to it, and you can modify it as well, put, you know, additional things on or take things off that don't apply to your farm. But it can be a good starting point, again, for you to begin thinking about these practices and the information you want to communicate to your employees. And then CSU Extension, so we're working on some simple graphics that farmers could use for employee training. So the one we have on the screen there is social distancing for farm workers. So, you know, keep a sorting bin between you. So it's just that thinking, just trying to get people to think visually about, you know, keeping that distance between each other and not getting close and maintaining that 6 foot barrier, or not barrier, 6 foot distance between you and your coworkers as much as possible. And we hope to have those resources hopefully next week, and I'll talk about some more resources in another slide as well. All right, Martha, next one. So we're also working on putting together some communication tools that you can use for your customers. And so the graphic card there on the in the middle of the green card there, that we're really thinking about how we want to communicate information out to our farmers. And so the idea is showing how food safety is interconnected and that we constantly need to be thinking about it and focus on it. And so that card there's links associated with each one of those pictures that takes them to a site like a CDC website or the FDA website, and just provides more information on each one of those activities. At the bottom of the page is a fresh produce fact sheet. The goal of that is really to dispel some rumors that are circulating out there about fresh produce. So like washing produce with soap, you know, we want to provide information on that not being a good practice. It also addresses if, getting the virus, if you can get the virus from food or food packaging or anyone handling the produce, which we already mentioned that isn't happening, as we know now, but those rumors are still circulating out there. So we just want to provide more clarification on that information. And then on the other side of the slide, we put together a food safety practices communication template. And so this would be something that you could give to your customers, have posted at your stands, however you would want to disseminate the information. But it basically has information on about, what you're doing at your farm to protect the consumer, and then also provides information on what those consumers or customers can do to protect your farm. So asking people not to come to your farm when they're sick, asking them to wash their hands, asking them not to touch their face, those type of things. So it can just be, we're trying to provide some tools to you guys to make it a little more manageable to get all this information together and communicate with your customers. And so, that particular document, you could put your logo on and you could add information to it if you have other practices that you're doing or other information that you want to communicate, or you can take things off. And so the idea is really just to get something out there that you guys can use now to start putting that communication information out to your customers. And then at the end of our presentation, we have several links to where you can go to get these resources and more resources that we have available for our farmers here in Colorado. And with that, I think we're going to turn it over to Mary Snow.
Thank you. So we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit and move off the farm to food pantries and donation sites. We are seeing humongous increases in need at our food pantries. One that I go to and volunteer at, we doubled last week the number of people that came for food packages. So they were doing a bunch of changes this time to not only the social distancing, but they're also making sure that they don't even want people to stand in line to sign up and to go through. So you want to, if you're doing a walkthrough, or if you are in a fixed building where people are coming in, provide hand washing stations or hand sanitizer. Make sure, or that you can request that they wash their hands when they come in, and then again when they leave. You want to make sure that you're disinfecting the surfaces on a regular basis. Anything that the customers use, whether it's a box or a bin or a shopping cart, doorknobs, anything that they're using. It's a lot of them are shifting to grab and go, where they're getting a pre-boxed food stuff instead of a self-serve. So for example, the mobile pantry that I go to and volunteer at shifted 2 weeks ago to a drive-through. And yes, it was a little bit chaotic, but the goal was that they didn't want people to get out of their cars. They didn't want to even, other than signing people in, they didn't really even talk to the participants other than finding out how many households they were picking up for. And then they pre-boxed all of the boxes and put them preferably in the trunk or in the back of the vehicle. So again, the person preferably did not get out of their vehicle at all. And then they just drove on and the next car came in. Limit the number of visitors, or monitor how many people are coming in. So you don't want to have so many people in the store. We're seeing this a lot with supermarkets and, like the mass merchants like Costco's and Walmarts and stuff, where they're only letting so many people in the store at a time. And then making sure that they're maintaining their distance of 6 feet apart. Be prepared for unexpected numbers and causing a whole lot of people, a whole lot of traffic. Doing a mobile pantry, we were lucky. I mean, for one thing, there isn't hand washing or bathrooms at all in the parking lot that we use. And so that it's hard to provide hand washing in that situation. So that's why they did the mobile. And we had to make sure that we actually parked the cars. And so it was kind of like, concert parking, where you park them in the very next available slot, and then we took them in order as they pulled in. So it took a little bit more planning. It was a little more chaotic. It took a little bit more time, but it actually went very well. Next slide. Make sure that, again, you are practicing good hand washing. I know you get tired of it, but that is your very best defense. So make sure that you are practicing good hand washing whenever you go to the store or to your farm stand or farmer's market or FSA, whatever the case may be. So make sure that you're washing your hands as soon as you get home. Wash your produce when you get home. The ones that you don't want to wash ahead of time are things like berries or mushrooms you just want to wipe off. But you know, things like apples or oranges or bananas or onions, make sure that you're giving those a good rinse. And when we say wash your produce, we're not talking about soap and water, because it could leave a soap residue and that could make you sick. So you want to use running water. You don't want to use a tub and just dump it in, you know, and soak. You want to rinse it with running water. Again, don't use soap or bleach or other sanitizers. You don't need to quarantine your food in your garage or on your porch or in your trunk or wherever for any number of days, because that's a very low likelihood of transmission, which we've mentioned before. Most stores now are not allowing you to use your reusable grocery bags, but now is an excellent time to get them clean. So wash them in your washing machine. I know that some of mine aren't always high quality reusable grocery bags, and so I don't put them in the dryer. The one time I did that, they fell apart. So now what I do is I wash them in hot water and then just let them air dry. So it's a great time to wash them because those things get really dirty, and that can cause foodborne illness with contamination and such. So again, remember that foodborne illnesses can still occur. You still need to clean, separate, cook, and chill your food properly. Make sure that you know, that you're cautious in that. We are seeing more increases in foodborne illnesses right now because there's more people at home cooking that don't normally cook, and they aren't necessarily real skilled in that. So make sure that, again, you're properly cleaning, that you're separating your food items. When you're cooking it to appropriate temperatures, and that you're getting things put in the refrigerator and not set out at room temperature for more than 2 hours. Next slide. Safe handling of produce resources. There is a lot of information out there about handling your produce. The Colorado Farm to Table website does have videos available, as well as other fact sheets and whatnot about safe handling of produce. So they talk about how you wash, and there's even videos showing you how to do that, how to store your produce for the best quality, and the importance of actually washing those. Next. So did we say wash your hands enough? If you haven't caught that yet, you need to wash your hands. Martha, you want to go through resources?
Sure, thank you, Mary. So we have listed some key resources for you here. There are lots of them. At the top is the Centers for Disease Control, their coronavirus information that's updated every day. So that's a really good source of those fact sheets that we mentioned, as well as updates on where there are particular hotspots. Just general information, and that's where we will look also as we see research coming out, if that research has any implications for produce handling and consumption. The CDC would be our go-to source for that information. All of our producer-facing information, for you all as growers, whether you are farmers or your home producers, homesteaders, we have a lot of information on this website. That's freshproduce.colostate.edu. It's also, you can also look through coproducesafety.org. We don't just have COVID-19 resources. We have a lot of information on managing produce safety, from workers to wild animals to agricultural water to hygiene and sanitation. So there are a lot of resources on there, many specific to the produce safety role. So please take a look at that. There is some really excellent and timely information on cleaning and sanitizing from University of Vermont that is at that blog. That is a really good source of information. USDA then, to understand emerging issues about the food supply. So USDA has a coronavirus page. And then you always want to keep in touch with guidance and requirements coming out of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, as well as San Juan Basin Public Health. So they will certainly be your go-to sources of information on public health requirements and recommendations. Lots more resources. We are more than happy to send you more, chat with you either now or through email. We're all working from home, so we're harder to reach by phone, but we have our email addresses here. You can feel free to contact us via email at any time. So feel free to reach out. And then, you know, lastly, we borrowed this from Washington State, which has been hit particularly hard, but just know, you know, we are trying to support the community of, you know, of our food system in Colorado, and, you know, feel like we can combined really work to move through this, this pandemic. And I like this graphic because we are all in it together. We just need to remember we've got some kind of particular circumstances where we just need to be a little bit apart, but we do all stand together. So with that, I will turn it back over to Robin for any questions or comments. And we'll just stay on the line to help support those.
Great. So if you can ask your questions in the chat box, that would be the best place to do that. Martha, could you back up one more slide so that we can have your contact information for people to write down?
Yes.
Great. Perfect. Thank you.
So we've got Christy, Mary, and myself. And absolutely, we're going to, I saw Allie's question. We're going to send this, well, actually, Robin has the PowerPoint. And so in the notes, there are a lot of links that you can use, as well as the links that were on the slide. So definitely those all work and are good to go. And if there's anything else that people need, we're happy to look for those too.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And one question that keeps reoccurring that I keep getting is it appropriate to wash our vegetables with soap?
No.
So Mary would like to address that.
No, big no on that. The soap residue will give you bad diarrhea. You really do not want to use soap on your fruits and vegetables. If you aren't comfortable with just using running water, you can use like a vinegar solution, like a 5% white vinegar, and do a 50-50 mix with water, and you know, spray that or dump that over it. Use a vegetable brush if you have one, or an old toothbrush even works if you clean and sanitize it first. Or even a nail brush if it's clean and sanitized, you can use that as a brush. But you know, if it's something like a cantaloupe that has netting, you definitely want to use the brush. But if it's something like a tomato or something like that, just regular running water is good enough to rinse off on those.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And then let's see. Yes, we'll be able to get a copy of this PowerPoint. And where can I find the sheet that lists what are you doing for you? What are we doing for you? That will be in the PowerPoint presentation as well.
And we'll send that and put it on our website too. That template for sure. We'll make that available.
And do you have a registration list for this that you're sending out the email or emails to?
Unfortunately, I don't. I just made it open to everybody. So okay. I will post that on our website.
Okay.
On our Archuleta County website. It'll also be posted on the CSU Extension state website. And then I will put it on our Facebook account too. And then let's see. Canyon Farm says the governor announced this afternoon everyone needs to wear masks. That also came from our San Juan Basin Health. And then send it out via social media. Yes, that's it. Are there any other questions that people have? I'm not seeing any more in the chat. So again, I just want to thank our presenters. Let's see. And I am using a veggie wash. Is that okay?
Yes, if it's a pre-purchased veggie wash, that's perfectly fine. You can use that. But if you don't want to go to that expense, vinegar and water will do the same thing.
Great. Okay. And Stacy Boone is, she's adding the link to the, I'm assuming this is the Colorado governor's message to everybody wear masks. So great, thank you, Stacy. All right, well, if there are no other questions, then I just want to say thank you to everybody. Oh, okay, Marianne is asking or saying that vinegar and water was not effective for killing these virus molecules.
For the coronavirus, it is not. However, they've not found it on fruits and vegetables. So you're using this rinse and vinegar solution to get everything else off of it.
Okay, good clarification. Thank you. All right. Terrific. Well, I want to thank everybody, thank our presenters, and I want to give out a special shout to Ruth Wilson, who is our Extension Technology Director. So thank you, Ruth, for helping us out today. And be looking for more webinars from us, and everybody stay healthy. Thank you very much.